It's a Monday. It's the first Monday in June, which means our Mondays with the Mayor series. Mayor Andrea Summerville is joining me in studio. Good morning. How are you today?
Well, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It was a busy weekend in the Settle household, I guess, and so I didn't spend very much time in town. Let's just put it that way. I was out of town with one of my daughter's activities. But let's talk. First of all, let's start with the budget process. I know that Sarah had a story here, maybe a little bit more than a week ago. You guys were going through a lot of the budget issues and trying to kind of get everything finalized, and the conversation about it seems like you got to kind of have it in 3-4 different parts in terms of whether both tax renewals pass, whether only one passes, or neither passes. So you got a couple different parts to kind of digest, and this is not a giant city budget as it is. So how has the conversation gone amongst the council?
Well, it's certainly, we're trying to be cautious of the city's budget with all of the unknowns that are coming up in August and November's elections. Whether the taxpayers choose to renew the 6th penny and the 5th penny taxes will really determine a lot of Laramie's budget. So what you're going to see in this year, although Laramie always does a 2-year biennial budget, this year is pretty much just a 1 year. The second year of the budget is pretty lean because we're not going to put anything in there until we see how those elections go.
Okay, and just a reminder, we've talked about this several times in the program. The 6th penny is on the August 21st ballot, while the 5th penny tax is on the November 6th ballot. And these are not new taxes. This is just maintaining the status quo in terms of funding. Now, I know you have certain priorities that you want to put these penny taxes towards. One of them, which is always a popular topic in Laramie, we never get away from this, happens to deal with street maintenance, paving, repair, whatever it is. That is a major goal of yours or of the council's in general, would you say?
I would say the council in general. I'm certainly a strong supporter of it, and I think that you can see that the council supports it by what we've put out on the 6th penny tax. Okay. We know that our streets, both on the west side in West Laramie and in East Laramie, need attention. They need some money. They need major maintenance in a lot of areas. It's not something that the city has been able to put a lot of money to. And now that we have the important stuff, the water and sewer lines improved, we would really like to focus on that being the next big project for Laramie, is putting some money into that.
Speaking of which, we had a little water sewer line issue around 15th and Grand last year. Any major projects that people need to be aware of coming up this summer in terms of water sewer project lines?
There's a few that are out there. I think there's actually one on the council agenda for Mitchell Street to be approved here, but they're pretty small scale this year. Okay,
not as major as that one was, obviously, and you guys were trying to beat some of the whiteout work. By the way, when it comes to street paving, maintenance, repair, Grand and 3rd do not count for the city of Laramie. I don't know how many times we have to emphasize that. I'm sure you guys get that all the time. When are you going to repair Grand? Grand from 15th to 3rd is on the agenda next summer for whiteout, so that'll be a big. It's not a full closure, but you know, you move traffic to one side of the street and you're only going one lane. That will be something to factor in on your daily commute, folks.
No, we've got a couple of good big improvement projects for 3rd Street and Grand Avenue coming from YDOT in the next few years, and we know they're a hassle, but they are so desperately needed. We hope everybody will have a little patience with us.
I love traveling Grand from 15th east. West towards 3rd, not so much. And I think a lot of us share that same sentiment. You recently it's 5 Tuesdays in the month of May, and you got another 5 Tuesday month coming up in July, so you had your ward meetings. How did those go? What did you hear in terms of feedback from citizens? Now, you're in Ward 1, but what about the rest of the council as well?
You know, I haven't gotten a good update from the rest of the council on their wards, but we did have a few people, somewhere 8, 9, attend the Ward 1 meeting. We talked about a lot of different stuff, talked a little bit about the budget, talked about streets, talked about some of the development code, the sign code in particular. You know, those board meetings are really there just to let people to come in and have a conversation. We can have it as a group, we can have it individual, but trying to make sure that we're as accessible as possible to the citizens.
And the next ward meetings, I believe, coming up July 31st. That'll be a 5 Tuesday month in the month of July. So take advantage of that. You can get a chance to sit down and visit with the city councilors that are in your ward on a one-on-one basis. Versus maybe have to wait through meetings and different comments and shorten your comments and all that good stuff. So hopefully you got some good feedback out of that. You talked about streets, and obviously where you are at Ward 1, streets is a big topic when it comes to paving over in West Laramie.
It's a huge topic for us. It's been a topic for West Laramie for since the late 60s, since they came into the city, frankly. So we did talk about that, and on that topic, we're going to be talking about that going forward through the summer. So the City Council has a series of work sessions that'll start here in June, June and July, to talk about what do we do with the unpaved streets, because they're not just in West Laramie. We have streets on First Street and Second Street and the cross streets that aren't paved as well. We've got some areas that definitely need some improvements. A lot of that has to do with drainage. Everybody thinks the pavement is important, but really the drainage is the issue that we really have to deal with first. You can see that pretty easily on 2nd Street and the northern 2nd Street areas when you go up there. So we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about that. The council, for the first time ever, is going to sit down and talk about what is the city's policy in terms of paying for streets that are undeveloped. What does that look like? What kind of revenue sources do we use? Is there a cost share with residents or businesses that are on those streets? What does that look like? And we hope by the end of the summer, going into the fall, that the council has, for the first time, an actual policy on that.
Well, and I always think about West Laramie in terms of non-paved streets. It's a little bit reduced property tax value over there, and I know you actually reached out and asked about within the city what that would do to maybe some property tax bills in West Laramie if you look at that in a way to finance some of this project.
That's a really great question, and one we're going to get fine-tuned details on again this summer. But when I've researched this and looked at this in the past, it does add to the property values if we improve the streets and they get the full street construction and sidewalks and drainage and all of that stuff. So I think that's definitely part of the conversation.
All right, and then it sounds like those might increase if you go that direction for folks in West Laramie, which obviously then would be a little pushback. Do you want, are you willing to pay a little higher property tax to fund some of the street paving? Mm-hmm. So that's something that will be part of the conversation here as we move forward. So
and we're going to look at all of the funding sources that are available. So specifically, we know that the city's general fund as it sits right now cannot handle a major influx of street work. Obviously, that's why we're putting this on the sixth penny. And we're not trying to set up, at least my vision of it is, we're not trying to set up anything where we would be using general fund money to pave and improve these streets. We'd like to look at all the alternative revenue sources that we have. So talking about special improvement districts, additional financing through property taxes, additional potential financing through the state. The SLIP board has a new kind of pot of money that's available for loans for street projects. So we're going to look at everything we can, grant opportunities that might still exist, although those are pretty far and few between for street construction, but we're going to look and we're going to see what we can put together.
It'll be interesting also to see coming up this summer, I think, as we visit with Mayor Andrea Summerville. It's our Mondays with the Mayor series. Let me live on KOWB. I'm your host, David Settle, and Mayor Summerville is in the studio with me. It'll also be interesting to see how the traffic pattern shifts a little bit as we get the new viaduct opening later on this summer. That's going to be, I'm really curious as to see how that goes.
We're on track. Hopefully the last update that I have was for a kind of maybe third week of July opening. We're hoping, and I think all the predictions have been that traffic pattern is potentially going to shift. That is going to become that new east-west main thoroughfare through town. It's going to be nice. It's wide. It's a few lanes on each side. It has the pedestrian and bike path on the south side and a pedestrian protected path on the north side. So there'll be opportunities for multimodal transport across the bridge, which is not something you can do very well on the Clark Street Viaduct right now.
It's not crumbling.
It's not crumbling.
It's brand new. At least we hope it's
lighting.
not.
I mean, there's so many pluses here. So we're going to have to take a look at that, and we are actually going to be looking at traffic models and with YDOT as that opens and seeing how that influences.
Yeah, because I'm just curious. I live on the northern side of the city, and so I'm just curious as to how that affects it, particularly around Harney Street there. In terms of crossing over and how much traffic decides to come straight across and go down Harney. Now that was redone several years ago, and I've actually been very glad that was a concrete paved area, and they did all kinds of drainage work several years back now. But I'm just curious as to see how that does affect traffic flow in Laramie kind of moving forward.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see, but we are expecting increased counts on Harney Street. In fact, in the budget that you'll see approved hopefully next week,
Okay.
There is a project set out if the 6 penny passes to redo 9th to 15th Street on Harney Street, just
okay.
because it's already in not so great shape, and we're expecting the additional traffic.
I would imagine maybe 4th Street from Harney, kind of maybe south back towards downtown, might be a little bit on there as well.
I don't think that's in this particular project. I think that the 9th through 15th section might be in a little bit worse shape, and we try to knock this off a chunk at a time, but I'm certain that it'll be something that the streets department monitors and looks at pretty closely as we go. Especially when you get high volume traffic, those are the streets that we really need to make sure that are in good shape.
What else is going on? You just mentioned you're getting ready to possibly approve the budget, and we've talked about that quite a bit, but what else is going on that folks need to be aware of that's kind of coming up here?
That's a great question. It's a little bit calm right now.
Oh boy.
I know. We've got some conversations with YDOT coming up on the council agenda for some agreements on Bill Nye and the extension of Bill Nye over to the Corthell Hill Road area.
Okay.
But it's pretty quiet so far right now. I think everybody's just relaxing into summer.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And it would be interesting to get Bill Nye paved at least as another outlet of traffic from the high school to have a different direction to go back towards the city. I mean, you think about, one of my daughters goes to high school, so I'm over there all the time. I'm over there all the time anyways with sports, but I'm over there more frequently now, even with a student, and just, I see the day-to-day backup of traffic, and just, it's been nice that there are a couple outlets that you can kind of go east and get out and around and maybe come back through towards town, but most people are kind of going back into town. Well, it'd be nice to maybe see some of those folks, instead of having to drive down Garfield and go back ways, maybe have a little quicker way to go back towards, Corthell and 15th and that area.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the Bill Nye extension right now is the City Council's #1 priority. We get a very small amount of money that's pass-through money that comes from the feds that goes to the state. And the City of Laramie, along with Albany County and YDOT, work on what's called the USAC committee to prioritize where we're going to put that money. It takes us several years to accumulate enough money to build a street, but Bill Nye, that extension is our first priority for exactly what you're talking about. The traffic up at the high school right now is not flowing as well as it needs to be. It's congested, it's difficult, and that's something that we're going to try to help as much as we can.
How do you go about going across quote-unquote private property back in that area?
Well, every road extension is an individual conversation with every property owner.
Okay.
So, for the actual road, the city or the government agency that's building it will go in and acquire or purchase that land, and then there's conversations about right-of-way, potentially easements for utilities, all of those things that kind of go along with it. But we always go and talk to each of the owners individually.
All right. So, that sounds like a and don't forget, a lot of these conversations coming up, I'll kind of cycle back to what you talked about with some of the streets. A lot of these conversations coming up, so kind of keep your ear out, keep your eye out, watching for dates and times and locations basically coming up this summer.
Yes, we'll have a couple of conversations starting in June. I believe it's the 4th Tuesday in June will be the first one, and then we'll have the other 2 in July. Conversations about West Laramie streets. So I'm looking at your calendar here.
So June 26th?
26th, I believe, that's the first one. So that's when we'll start talking about policy for unpaved and undeveloped streets.
All right, so be on the lookout for those folks and get involved in the conversation. They want to hear from you. They'd rather hear from you than have you keep quiet and then all of a sudden get angry about something that didn't happen the way you wanted it to.
Absolutely, and to that point, I forgot to mention, part of this conversation that's really important is also what kind of street are we building. Are we just doing ribbon paving with the ditches on the side for drainage with a sidewalk, or are we doing full street construction with full drainage? There's price differentials for each of those. There's time differentials for maybe how much we can afford. So all of that will be part of the conversation, and that specifically is actually what we're going to start the conversation with on June 26th.